Taking a look at the weather around the country this Wednesday afternoon, another surge of Arctic air coming in from Canada into the Great Lakes region and the Midwest. Let's take a look at those 24-hour temperature changes. And there has been a drastic drop-off of temperatures in Saskatchewan, down to about 40 degrees colder than 24 hours ago. That cold surge spreading into Minnesota, the Dakotas, and into Nebraska. But if we take a look at that western edge, just not hitting the classic areas like Cut Bank and Great Falls, typically those Arctic outbreaks go right through there, and we hear about those records in Montana. But these past several outbreaks tracking repeatedly into the northeastern U.S. Here is the current surface analysis this afternoon. We're going to do a cross-section through this Arctic air from, say, northern Idaho through Minnesota and into New York. So there is what that looks like. A strong jet coming out of Saskatchewan, heading into the page directly towards you. That's that northwesterly flow coming out of Canada. The frontal boundary located about right here, folding up into the north, or I should say northeastern and eastern side of that jet. So that right there is the polar front jet. And down here we have the western edge of that front. The core of the Arctic air right there in North Dakota. And it forms kind of a bulge. The cold air displaces these potential temperature lines upward, and that signifies where the cold air is located. And we can see a little frontal inversion out here across the northeastern U.S. That could be a subsidence inversion as well. And then this air out here, that's going to be the old modified polar air, a little bit warmer, sitting across the plateau region of the west. And let's take a look at what's going on out there in Montana. That Arctic air filtering south. Temperatures a rather modest 20 degrees at Glasgow, rising to 44 at Lewiston and 49 at Great Falls. So that's almost warm enough to sit out there with a barbecue and enjoy the sun. So the backside of that front located right about here. And then the air further out to the west. That's an older polar air mass. In the valley is still quite cold, 27 at Missoula, but elsewhere warming up into the 40s. And going up into that Arctic air, yeah, we get rapidly below 0 Fahrenheit. And up there around Uranium City and Stony Rapids, down to minus 17. And I see minus 21 right there. So yeah, it does cool off quite a bit, and that air is coming south. Look at that. Gusting to 36 at Green Bay. These are snow squalls moving rapidly to the east-southeast. And you can take a look at them there on the radar. We've got snow squall warnings in effect out there north of Milwaukee. That's it. Snow squall warning. A dangerous snow squall warning located somewhere around these Wisconsin towns, moving east at 50 miles an hour, intense bursts of heavy snow and gusty winds up to 35 miles an hour and greater. So, looking at the United States as a whole, 992 millibar low, just east of Lake Superior, strong pressure gradients from Wisconsin to Minnesota, North Dakota. Winds in North Dakota still up near 30 miles an hour. The leading edge of that cold air running from northern Indiana to around St. Louis and down towards Dalhart, Pampa, Amarillo. But there's this little zone of warmer weather, so you could probably draw a secondary front. Somewhere in here, yeah, I should have drawn that in there. Sorry, guys. So, yeah, there's a boundary right there. And then further down in Texas, we have this other boundary. Okay. Little warm front there in Kentucky, dividing these low 50s and upper 40s from cooler air in Ohio. Here's an outgoing polar air mass. You You can see the dew points down there, 20s and 30s. So that is of Canadian origin. Even got 21 there around Columbia. So that is a modifying polar air mass, and this is a fresh polar air mass with a... Whew! We are getting thunder here. Heard the windows rattle pretty good there. 1036, 1038 millibars in Saskatchewan. And then further up in the high Arctic, we drop well below zero. Okay, let's do our region by region. In the northeastern U.S., quite a bit of weather going on. We've got a blizzard warning in effect from far western Maryland into the mountains of West Virginia. That runs tonight and tomorrow, 4 to 8 inches of snow, winds up to 60 miles an hour. There could be local accumulations up to 1 foot. We have lake effect snow warnings in the Ontario snow belt. That's from Hamburg to Erie to Cleveland, inland about 100 miles into Oil City and Brookville, 10 to 20 inches of snow along the coast. Again, this is through Saturday as this next system moves in quickly from the west. In Maine, we have a winter storm warning tonight through tomorrow into the northern part of Maine there, 6 to 10 inches of snow. New York, winter storm warning. That's going to be around Syracuse, 4 to 8 inches of snow there, 10 to 18 inches further north in the Tug Hills. And Pennsylvania, winter storm warning in the Allegheny Mountains right through here, from Clearfield to Johnstown and Somerset. And I'll just show you this. This is a good measure of the upper level energy available. The red indicates Q vector convergence. That's associated with upward motion in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. So at 7 p.m., about the time many of you are watching this, most of the strong upper-level forcing moving out into Lake Michigan and into Michigan itself. And as mentioned, we do have that winter storm warning and winter weather advisories in that area. Some of that lift extending all the way down towards Indianapolis, Champaign, Urbana, and so on. As we go into the 1 a.m. hour, the upper lift rapidly moves eastward into Ohio, northeastern Kentucky, and by tomorrow morning, most of that forcing up there in New England and Maine. Another zone of upward forcing moving across the Appalachians, and gradually things start clearing out tomorrow, and that'll leave us mostly with considerable lake effect snows. Most of the dynamically forced widespread precipitation should start shutting down. And as you can see, sneaking off there in the southwestern U.S., a cutoff low. So we're going to cover that shortly. This is a look at the official graphics from Environment Canada for tomorrow. They are looking for very heavy lake effect snows, up to 12 to 16 inches around London, Ontario, and then downstream from Georgian Bay around Barrie, they're looking for about anywhere from 6 to 8 inches. And at the current time, they are under snow squall warnings as well. Here's the expected snowfall totals from the National Digital Forecast Database. Heaviest snows around Erie, up to Jamestown, and across the Syracuse area. A lot of coverage into New England and northern Maine. In the valleys, about 3 to 7 inches of snow, and some very heavy accumulations in the central and northern Great Lakes area. Into Ohio and Indiana, rapidly tapers off below 3 inches, only looking at 1 inch there at Columbus, 1 inch. What is that, Kokomo? Well, they got a song about that from the 80s. And in the Hudson River Valley, about 1 to 2 inches between Poughkeepsie and Albany. And then looking at the southeastern U.S., fair skies. Cold air mass in place, 40s across North Carolina, 50s in the deep south, 60s and 70s for Florida. But clouds moving in from the west. We've got a weak atmospheric river coming in from the Gulf and from Mexico that'll spread widespread precipitation into Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi over the coming days. This is what we're talking about, the integrated vapor transport. How many channels give you this information? IVT 400 to 500, 600 across Louisiana, and then going into tomorrow, spreading out towards the Georgia, South Carolina area, and then moving offshore. Then a reprieve over the early weekend, and then another moisture surge coming into Texas for Saturday and Sunday, and that grows rapidly. And then around midweek, look at this thing, major weather system in the southern U.S. moving up the eastern seaboard. So, yeah, this will have to be watched along the northeast coast around December 12th. Some potential, mostly rain, but some indications of some heavy snow from New England down into Pennsylvania. There's a look at the conditions in Texas, showing that atmospheric river, not just this high cloud, but down in the lower levels, you can see some bands moving from south to north. That's going to be lower cloud. So all of this spells a very rainy period over the next 24 hours in the Gulf Coast area. Then we're going to get that clearing towards Friday. Up to the north, fair skies from New Mexico to Missouri. But you head up north and we run headlong into that Arctic outbreak. Some of the stronger low-level forcing right through here from Chicago to Omaha and Rapid City, picking up extensive cold advection cumulus from Minnesota down into Wisconsin. That's where that snow squall activity is located. However, the western zones are dry. So cold, blustery, and sunny in South Dakota. And then we go to the southwestern U.S. Stagnant weather. You might think there's nothing to see. Snow in the mountains. But if you take a closer look at these little cloud fragments in the four corners. They're moving east to west. In the Mojave Desert here, these clouds are moving northwest to southeast. These fragments here are moving to the northeast, and these are moving north. So what does that tell us? That is outlining rotation, and that paints out exactly where that upper level low is located. There it is on the heights and vorticity chart. It appears to be right over Phoenix. And these wind barbs, those correspond very closely to the motion of those cloud fragments. Up to the north, a cutoff high across Idaho that represents a shallow layer in the mid-levels of relatively warmer air that forms an inversion which traps the air down lower. And they do have fog advisories across the Snake River Plain from Ontario down to Boise, Twin Falls. They're expecting heavy fog through tomorrow. The satellite imagery for this afternoon showing extensive fog and stratus across the Columbia River Basin and across the Snake River Valley around Ontario and Boise. Let's drop a quick cross-section through the Boise area using pivotal weather. And there we see that layer of warm air from about 5,000 feet up to 20,000 feet. So that's helping to support that mid-level high pressure area on the 500 millibar chart. So that's supporting the cutoff high. And where is that relative to Boise? Well, you can use Bayes-Ballott's rule. Take a look at the winds. They're out of the west. Bayes-Ballott's rule means that you have low pressure on your left with your back to the wind, high pressure to your right. So the upper level high, that's going to be to the south, probably over northeastern Nevada. And indeed, that is the case. Could be a little bit further north across Idaho, but it is south of Boise. So you can use those little indicators to pick out exactly where your weather systems are. So that's what's happening around the country. The yellow indicating the fog. A little bit of San Joaquin Valley fog around Fresno, hanging on. Then we go up north. Yep, fog advisories earlier today for Vancouver, up into the islands up here, whatever strait that is. As we go north into Alaska, there has been a remarkable change over the past 24 hours. You may remember on the supporter stream back on Monday, we had temperatures around minus 40 in central Yukon. Much, much different. We've got 33, 16, little pocket of minus 11. That hasn't eroded just yet. But that area is under deep southerly flow. So that is scouring out that Arctic air, temperatures rising rapidly. Winter weather advisories all across southern Alaska in association with that warm advection that excludes Anchorage and the Kenai Peninsula. Further north, mixed precipitation, including freezing rain, up to 3 inches of snow today and tomorrow. Prudhoe Bay under a winter weather advisory through this evening for blowing snow. Blizzard warning further east around Kaktovik. Then we go into Canada itself. Yep, as we mentioned, a lot of cold air in Saskatchewan. Much warmer as you go to the west. Freezing rain warning for today from Dawson, British Columbia to Edmonton. Conditions improving this afternoon. Winnipeg under a blowing snow advisory. Many of the areas in central Minnesota also under snow squall watches and warnings. They're catching that strong cold advection as well. And as we mentioned, numerous winter weather advisories all along the Great Lakes area. The Transcan from Timmins to Armstrong, Lake Nipigon, right in here. That's going to be kind of a hazardous area to be driving. And of course, spotty problems further west towards Winnipeg, where we pick up those other winter warnings. Okay, so that is the grand tour. Let's take a look at the jet stream level chart. Deep northwesterly flow from Canada into the northeastern U.S. There is that almost a Rex block. It is somewhat of a blocking pattern since we do have this closed low across Arizona. Going into the weekend, very slow movement on that cutoff low, gradually approaching Texas. And as it does, the flow will strengthen and we'll see increased prospects for heavy rain. A new wave moving onto the northwest coast. The northeastern U.S. starts to get on the backside of this long wave trough, moving offshore. And then going into early next week, another large trough carving out across the western U.S. Then around midweek, this very potent trough moves into the southern U.S. that will couple with strong jet stream dynamics, and we're going to see a rather powerful system across the East Coast around Wednesday and Thursday. And looks like more active weather going into the middle of December. Look at that deep trough right there on the West Coast. I guess we're going to have a busy period coming up here. Another possible atmospheric river event for California, and it remains to be seen what happens in the central U.S. So we shall see. Just a very quick look at Canada. There's that cold air mass coming out of Saskatchewan. You can see that there's nothing really in back behind it. So that'll give us a little bit of a reprieve from these cold air blasts. Series of storm tracks works into southeastern Alaska. And then going into the weekend and next week, not really a whole lot of change. Some weak high-pressure areas move into Ontario and Quebec, but none of those raging 1040, 1050, 1060 millibar highs up there in the Northwest Territories. So, yeah, no significant changes across much of the U.S., but probably a continuation of that very cold weather pattern. And we start opening up quite a storm track there on the West Coast. And we'll just give you a quick version of the forecast. There's that strong Arctic weather system moving through the northeastern U.S. overnight into early morning and clearing the East Coast by midday. In the wake of that, strong lake effect snows. The main high-pressure area from Saskatchewan, 1035 millibars, driving into the southeastern U.S. towards the early weekend. And that will spell a rather cold and dry period for Friday and Saturday. In Texas, we pick up our next weather system, isentropic lift, over the state as this next system develops on the Gulf Coast. Here's the next round coming in from the northwestern U.S. Cold advection into the central U.S. and the Rockies. That will lay down a boundary towards Tuesday. That'll get picked up by that northwesterly flow, that strong wave embedded in that flow, and we will see baroclinic development in southeast Texas and Louisiana, into Alabama, and into Virginia for Thursday and Friday. Quite a bit of forcing associated with that. Fortunately, a lot of rain along the coast, but as you go inland, it does change over to snow. And then the last item of interest around December 13th, a strong California weather system, so possibly more heavy snows for the Sierras for the following weekend, the weekend after this one. And that will do it for this edition of Forecast Lab. How has the weather been in your part of the country? Let me know in the comments, and we'll check that out and see what's going on in all the different corners. All right, hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday night, and take care, and we will see you on Friday. Bye-bye.